present in order to explain some of the scientific theorems. Now, in 2012, you see, in 1964, Higgs, a scientist, he postulated a theorem that actually there is a particle, again that can be subdivided in a particle which provides energy to another particle in a Gibbs field. That is actually the scientist of spiritual scientist takes into the matter. It is already told in Bhagvat Gita 5,000 years back that everything inhalates from one of the source. And you see the dark matter, I mean to say the Gibbs experiment in Sun's lab 2012, that provides that okay, this is actually something which actually provides the energy when it interacts with the Higgs field, then it provides energy to other particles. Therefore, now the question comes here, the energy, that where the at t.0, where actually this energy comes to the picture. Therefore, many scientists who actually explain this theorem, sometimes when the scientific theorems does not hold good at that time, they assume certain things, and based on the speculations and assumptions, this theorem holds good. That is actually the observations of scientific, and you see that mostly some of the mysteries of galaxies also is not yet being proved or not yet been explained. In that concept, some of the assumptions has been made. That is what actually Prabhupada and his disciple, they actually explained the cause that Prabhupada strictly told that okay, these scientists have a limited knowledge because whatever they observe, they have that concept. They cannot think beyond that. Therefore, sometimes they call that is a Dr. Frog. That means you see somebody so he knows about this, the concept of the dimension of the kuan. If somebody comes from the ocean, then the frogs inside the kuan, they cannot able to predict actually. Okay, there is a outside world which is infinite in nature. That actually what I tried to explain that some of the concepts what actually Prabhupada explained and his scientist disciple what he explained in terms of consciousness and what in terms of material extensions and what actually the correlations what actually Bhagavad Gita told. That is the basics of today's lecture. And I am talking about another concept that is called the creation of the universe, which generally sometimes it is the basic introduction of, though I am not a particle physicist, but what I read from the physics books, that is actually there is nothing, and there is a all of a sudden there is a blast, energy comes, and from the energy nothing fundamentally to physical, nothing to physical, nothing to everything, from physical to matter, from the matter to life, and there is no experimental analysis, there is no mathematical proof that it happens. But in order to explain the creation of the universe, they just speculated this idea, what we call the Big Bang theory. Therefore, what happens? This is already been explained in some of the scriptures that about there is actually energy, what we call that is the energy of the Supreme Lord. There it manifests in two factors, whether it is matter or energy. It is the Krishna's invention or what you call the creation that everything happens. That is actually the things what I explained. The principles of modern science, mostly it is based on the empirical evidence, based on observations, reproducibility of the results, and falsifiability of the hypothesis. Particularly in case of in computer science, we have certain equations, you know. In cryptography, since I am a researcher in cryptography, the entire the aspects of cybersecurity based on some underlying problem of mathematics. We do not have a computational feasibility to solve some of the equations that basis of our cryptography. But we know that someday it will happen that all these security aspects will collapse, a new theorem will happen. Therefore, Prabhupada actually, he already when he told that, okay, the speculative ideas is actually does not work in spiritualism. There is a truth which is perfect and it is absolute. And we cannot go a truth that it is sometimes it is truth, after 10 years or 15 years, it becomes false. That is actually what is actually he tried to explain. And what I told about the mathematical principles, you see, suppose if x equal to 2 or even number, then the square of the even number is square. In that case, what happens? It is valid for all integers. then it is a theorem. If you can find certain equations like x cube plus y cube equal to z cube, when can you find a number which is for x, y, z, this equation satisfies. In that case, actually, what happens? You cannot find out a number. It will, let us say we have a computational procedure. It will work for infinite. You will keep on searching it. In that case, actually, therefore, certain assumptions has been made. Okay, there is actually limited power. Exactly what happens? Our brain in that capacity where we provide them the consciousness. Then the next topic we discuss about the Prabhupada's definition of what actually the scientific knowledge. We discussed about the initial observation, hypothesis, formula, and demonstrations, and they have the limited knowledge. Because whatever the thing and observe, they speculate the theorem, but all the theorems, that is actually temporary, and once upon a time, this theorem has been discarded by another theorem. That's why sometimes he used a very strict language, rascals, and they are actually making very false statements. They do not know about the hypothesis, but explain the hypothesis very in a better way. That is actually the Prabhupada's definition. Let us talk about the Bhagavad Gita's concepts. The next topic, what we can discuss about the consciousness. Why I have chosen this topic? Because you see, ISKCON Bulla is associated, founded by one of a very reputed scientist, one of the scientists who actually, one of the favorite student of Prabhupada, His Grace, His Holiness, Sipad Maharaj, T.D. Singh sir. Actually, he conceptualized this consciousness through a spiritual particle that is called spirital. In order to explain this consciousness particle through the scientist, he developed this idea. That's why I have chosen this topic. What actually the consciousness, what the material scientist, that their intention about the consciousness, and how this material scientific concept that is being characterized by a particle which is invented by Sripad Maharaj. In scientist view, consciousness is totally materialistic. Therefore, the doctors who are present here, they told that okay, there is a neural orderness in our brain. When the brain works, then the consciousness comes. Therefore, the consciousness is totally materialistic. It depends upon certain chemical reactions of our brain. If somebody goes mentally disordered or in coma state, then there is no consciousness. But however, recent
sound again the koila bhara गाड कोड भळे असला
In contrast, modern science generally approaches consciousness as an emergent property of a brain, and there are so many different theories. Consciousness arises from neural activity of the brain. Damage to the brain affects consciousness, and no evidence of consciousness existing outside the body. Therefore, this concept is totally discarded, or there is a contradictions by the spiritual scientist. And according to Sripad Maharaj, the consciousness is a symptom of soul. That is what we call the Atma. He described consciousness with a deterministic and undeterministic matter. For example, let us take, we have a particle. If I throw a particle, then if we know that the initial velocity is v0 and time t0, or at a certain time it is being projected, then I can definitely find where it will be projected and what is the distance covered and what angle. If I know the angle based on the laws of motion and physics, I can, with 100% surety, I can predict what actually this is. But let us take a consciousness body. For example, a bird, if it is being thrown or projected, can we find with a measurement that it will exactly fall into this category or in this place? Therefore, what he told that consciousness cannot be measured in a material way, that is being measured in an unconsciousness particle. Therefore, if a unconsciousness particle or a body being attached with a consciousness or soul, then it plays a different way, and there is no way a materialistic scientist can measure its property. Therefore, the symptoms that is associated with soul, that is called Atma, and he described a
Spirit.
he introduced a particle that is called spiritum. It is a transcendental particle responsible for consciousness found in all living beings. That is his concept in order to explain what the consciousness associated with Atman or soul that has been attached with the body. Therefore, he explained the death is actually the bodily detachment from the life. But the body does not, I mean, to the life does not destroy, or it cannot be. There is no death of a life. But whenever fundamental, I mean to say materialistic way, we define death as what happens, there is a body, and the body changes, or the destruction of body from a life, or detachment of a body from the life, that is associated with the death. And this Atman, what happens, that is reside also. That is actually correlated with the laws of conservation, what I discussed in the next topic. F5.
Identity rolling no computer money.
No issue. That's fine. That's it. He advocates that consciousness originates from the spiritum, and it explained unpredictably in living organs. It found in all living organisms, and which cannot be measured by any physical means. That I discussed about when a bird with or a particle with certain atman or with a consciousness brain, when being projected, there is no physical way we can measure that where actually it will go. It can go anywhere. Then there is no way. And the contradictions
वो पर पॉकेटर पूरी ईयर कॉर्ड वे मोर कहीं
Now I am going to correlate some of the scientific laws and how it is associated with Bhagavad Gita. The law of energy. In physics, it explains that energy is neither created or not destroyed. It can only transfer from one form to another form. Those who are actually completed in 12th physics, that is clearly explained there is a form of potential energy, kinetic energy. When there is a big picture that about, you see, when a pendulum is moves, sometimes that is called energy conservation, which always remains same. Exactly what happens here actually in spiritual or in Bhagavad Gita, it explains that for the soul there is neither birth or death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing and primeval. He is not slain. When the body is slain, it is neither created nor destroyed.
Dear students, please don't talk with each other. So be attentive here. So we have a guest here. So if you discuss with each other, then it is actually not good. So students, those are sitting backside. So please don't discuss, don't disturb.
So students, पूछ सकते हैं any questions at any moment.
Question है तो पूछ सकते हैं. And don't discuss, okay, or talk with each other.
Because there are so many senior devotees who are actually physically they are scientists, and also spiritually they are bigger scientists. In case if I am not able to answer your queries, they can also better explain. They are all scientists actually, they are all engineers and have significant achievements in their professional goals. You can ask me, even if you can ask any questions related to physics, mathematics, or computer science, and you are free to ask questions. Let us resume here. You can ask some questions, please. There can be so many questions. See, when I joined ISKCON, before that I can have so many questions. And sometimes even the greatest of the scientists, Einstein, Rutherford, and even if Regress, and all the Nobel laureates, when
इंटरनेट देखो
I have
स्पीड
read the
बोलने से
books
इनके
of
कौन सी साइंटिफिक
Sripad
आंसर
Maharaj,
कौन सा भी है
they have interviewed with all these greatest scientists and what they think
इंटरनेट
about
में बुक रहते
the spiritualism
तो
and
इंटरनेट थी वो ना से बुक
in
डी
their
बस
ideas. This is the Eastern
स्पिरिट में
concepts
बोलेगी
of
ना उठे के चिमटे इन
life
फिजिक्स
and
रे
Eastern concepts of understanding the creation, and that is the Western concept of understanding the creation. And later they found that, okay, yes, there is some entanglement, that there is a supreme power and supreme soul which is actually. Thank you. This is what I discussed about, that is called laws of energy. Therefore, he correlates that soul is the particle energy, what I call spiritum. That is actually the particles or energetic particles that is being formed or
मैम
the
को
part
मुंडा
of
पड़ा यार
the supreme soul. There is the difference he has explained. You see, by qualitatively they have the same property, but quantitatively that is different. Govind Prabhu told in classes so many times, there is a gold mine and a gold particle. The property remains same, but gold mine is different and gold particle is different. That is what happens, but it cannot be destroyed, but it cannot be created. It just transmigrates from one body to another body through certain process. And this process actually is being clearly defined in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, that what is the process, and when the body changes, that soul, which body will get depending upon his karmas and practices that is being followed. Therefore, it is totally dedicated to the Krishna consciousness and Krishna's energy, whether it is a material energy or a spiritual energy or internal energy or external energy. That is what they describe the conservation of law. The second will be mass and energy equations, what we call E equal to mc square. When Einstein postulated the theorem, they are actually later there is mass is different from the energy, but in order to explain some of the theorems, he in the relativity he postulated relativity, then he postulated photoelectric effect. There he explains that mass can be converted to energy. Therefore, the concept which actually in Big Bang theory describes the never nothing to everything is totally discarded by the Bhagavad Gita. And you can realize also, if nothing, then how everything will be generated? How the matter, how the life from the matter is originated. That is really a contradicting phenomenon, which Big Bang theory cannot explain certain things. That argument was clearly, in an interview, it was clearly explained by Sripad Maharaj, that how a lifeless particle can create a life. If a chemical reactions provide a body, then if somebody is given all chemical properties, let us take all compounds has been given, then can he create a life? Which cannot be created life. In that definition, actually, some of the scientists in that forum, they cannot explain, therefore they assume and they wordless that how it is being explained, how a lifeless or matter, a life comes from a matter. That is actually the next concept that we call equal to mass energy relationship. What concept was we called the Higgs boson. Higgs boson is a 2012, you know about CERN, CERN, the cyclotron. You see there are around 1,000 scientists, they worked day and night to find out the concept of the boson, Higgs boson. It is a subatomic particle responsible for giving mass to other particles via Higgs field. Therefore, this Higgs field, what actually this was explained by, there is a Krishna's energy, and from the energy Krishna's, either it will be the material energy or the external energy or the internal energy, everything is being postulated. He founded thousands, I mean to say, Ananta Koti Brahmand Kanayak. In a one glance, we can create so many Brahmandas. Therefore, this is actually, in order to concept now, this in 2012, Higgs boson, the scientist, he got the Nobel Prize, and the team got Nobel Prize. That you see, mean to say, yes, that is a particle. They actually are responsible giving the mass to other when it will be the energy, and into the energy is the fundamental which actually created other particles are responsible for other particles. Therefore, in Bhagavatam, what happens, some of the spiritual scientists, they described this Higgs field and Higgs energy as actually the Krishna's Maya energy, what we call external energy, that is responsible for describing this property. Srimad Bhagavatam explains that all creation stems from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His spiritual and material energies govern the cosmic functions of the universes. Therefore, there is a correlation between what we call Higgs field and the Brahman concept. There is some correlations, but Bhagavad Gita. I am not discussing about the contradictions. Therefore, you being the scientists or scientific students, you can have so many contradictions. But you see, in order to disprove a theorem, one example is sufficient. If I am talking of man is mortal, for all x, if this statement is valid, for all x, if x is a man, then he is mortal. But if you can find an instance for x equal to x1, this person is immortal, then theorem does not hold good. Therefore, if you can have an example that this statement goes wrong, then this is actually, I mean to say, that can be. Therefore, whenever a absolute truth or whenever the Vedic cultures or whatever the in the Gita, the Krishna's teaching, what if it is true for all aspects, all instances, there is no way that you can find that sometimes it behaves true or sometimes it behaves false. Just like I give an example in computer science, x cube plus y cube is z cube. You cannot say yes, there is a xyz available, or you cannot say there is no xyz available. It is search for in that case, we cannot say these are algorithmic aspects of defining equations. Exactly, in Bhagavad Gita and Gita, I conclude that the aspects which is explained in Gita to understand the universe is totally absolute. That is not time dependent. Sometimes it is applicable, and when the situational changes, and this is not applicable. This is what actually explained these concepts of absolute truth. I hope this is how the creation of Prakriti and the creation of universe, that I do not let us conclusion on Higgs field. The Higgs boson metaphorically reveals that this is actually the Krishna's energy, and from this energy everything is being created, and what we call that is actually Higgs field. That is actually, I discussed that then. I discussed about some of the challenges in particle physics from Dalton theory to Schrodinger's and Higgs theory, and let us conclude. These actually some of the scientists, they seek God. I mean to say, whenever they did not find anything, then he assumed that yes, there is a greater force behind, because you see there is so many galaxies, and how this binding force they created, and that is an intelligent way who has designed this universe. A material scientist cannot design a solar system. No doubt, China recently has created a sun that is called the artificial sun, but it is a, I think what we can say, it is 1 billionth part of the entire sun. So this is what actually I wanted to explain. This is what I got it. Now, I'm not taking the contradictions about the science and the modern science with the Vedic way to define science. but there is so much of correlations between, if we understand Gita, then definitely almost all complex aspects of modern science that has been explained in Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Particularly if you have the time, please go through the books that has been published by His Holiness Sripad Maharaj Ji, and he explained so many books. And recently I got a journal by Bhaktivedanta Institute. They are actually the professors from IIT and MIT and Stanford University. They describe what actually the concept of God, whether God is a person, how God can be defined as a person. And it is really beautiful because I was asked by Amai Prabhu ki you just give some explanations about the scientific way to describe it. Then I read these concepts. It is amazing. Then they have also, in some point of time, they agreed that yes, God is a person, which a book is being published by Sripad Maharaj Ji. Please go through the books of Sripad Maharaj Ji in case if you wish to understand the science, understand the modern science in terms of your Vedic values. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you all the dear participants and students. And my audiences to Amai Prabhuji, this is my first lecture. I mean to say, so far as the Vedic concepts are concerned and ISKCON's lectures are concerned, though I was directed by Govind Prabhu in so many days, you please start preaching, you please start preaching. But I was really not in the caliber that my stalwarts, they are sitting in front of me. But however, I tried to correlate some of the concepts that I learned from the books of Sripad Maharaj Ji and Prabhupada, and how this is being related in Bhagavad Gita. That is a very basic definition and a motivation to all of you. Please go through the books, and whenever you think of, and also in that, when I discussed this thing, Ramanujan, the greatest mathematician, he wrote that when I slept, Mata Lakshmi actually, he described certain things, and I wrote in the diary. Therefore, there are so many mathematical equations, which has complex equations that was being found from the diary of Ramanujan, and he explained. You see, the greatest mathematician, he explained that, okay, some of the equations, some of the mathematical theorems that was being discovered in my sleeping conditions. I mean to say that is not an unconsciousness state. And Mata Lakshmi actually, see, he is the devotee of Mata Lakshmi. Generally in his home, Mata Goddess Lakshmi is being worshipped, and all the mathematical equations, he has more than thousands of mathematical complex equations that is being written in his diaries, and some of the mathematical equations is being prescribed by Ramanujan, but other mathematical equations that was put in the diary and he explained. Therefore, many of the scientists, they believe that yes, the Indian concept of, or particle, the Eastern concepts of understanding the universe, which is being explained in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, that is, now they are thinking, okay, yes, they are the concepts which really can be taken into account for future classes and future researches. Thank you so much. Any questions, please? Any question hai to aap any questions? There are stalwarts. They are actually sitting in front of me. Acharya Kisan Prabhu and Acharya Ratan Prabhu, Amai Prabhu, Pankaj Ram Prabhu, Govind Prabhu. They are all Prabhus having 30-40 years of experiences, and professors in Vedic Shastras, they are also sitting. Students can have so many questions because you see, in IITs, what happens, there is a, Professor Loknath Behra, the director of IIT Mandi now, Leela Purushottam Prabhu, you see, unka bhi, they have started a way, and he made this IIT Mandi campus as a vegetarian campus. No doubt many critics came. You see, the professor in IIT India kya sochega, kya hoga, but he made it, and now students really realizing the concept. You can have so many concepts. There is a concept of the Industry 4.0 where artificial intelligence plays an important role. I think can AI provides consciousness? That is actually recent research topic of these and IITs. Whether AI can have provide consciousness to a machine can have certain consciousness that a human brain is. So therefore, if you can have any doubts or questions.